This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending in person. We have a few folks here in person as well as online to this month's Chamber Council on Sales and Marketing. This is the final one in the series for 2020. This has been sponsored by APG Local. We are so appreciative of their support of the Chamber and the Sales and Marketing Council. We have today with us Mr. Dunn, who is with Strategic Orchestration, LLC, and today's topic is managing salespeople differently. Before I turn it over to Dale, though, I'll let our sponsor say a few words. I know Ginger's on the call. Ginger, if you want to take it away and say a few words.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for letting us do this. And Dale, we haven't met before, but I really appreciate you presenting this as we've had a strange year. Most people have experienced some unusual things with COVID. Sometimes management does get a little tricky. So having a refresher is very nice, but we do appreciate the Chamber and everything that they do and love being able to support them. So thank you all for being there in person or online.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the kind words, Ginger. We appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure working with you guys this year. So with no further ado, let me unmute Dale real quick.
It's a dangerous thing to unmute me, but thank you. And APG, Ginger, and Pam, thank you for very much for letting me take this spot today. I appreciate that. I won't spend a lot of time up front here about me and my business, but I will tell you that one of the things I do is I provide training and development opportunities, and one of those is a full series around results-driven sales management. And in doing that, there are 10 months worth of material on a once-a-month basis with some online learning in between that I provide. This is the first session of that 10-month session, but I've also taken it from about a 2.5-hour session, try to cram it here in about 45 minutes to an hour. So if I start to speed up, I'm just trying to get to all the points before the end here. And there's also some places in here that I would probably stop and let's have some discussion, but I'm going to hold that discussion and consider those questions rhetorical for right now as we go through this. One of the things I just found a quote that I thought was interesting, not just for salespeople, but for managing in general, but it says, "You don't lead by hitting people over the head. That's an assault, not management." And that was Dwight D. Eisenhower who stated that. So that being said, let's start with just the overview. I want to speak about what high impact sales managers should understand, that their salespeople require a different type of management than the standard general employee would. And there's probably ways of dealing with other groups of people in a different way too, because there are uniquenesses to different groups that I've known over the years. But this session, I want to look specifically at some of the most important best practices when it comes to managing salespeople and how you actually do that management, because that particular management is really key to providing that manager to making sure their salespeople are actually doing what they're expecting to do. So in some of the key points, first thing you need to do is understand your salespeople. You have to understand them to know how to effectively manage the group of individuals. Next, it's absolutely essential to recognize that the way you're used to managing employees in general, staff, etc., it may not work for your salespeople. And sometimes it does, but in most cases, you'll find your sales teams are not going to be as responsive to that standard way of managing. And finally, I'm going to be identifying how high impact sales managers overcome 10 challenges of managing salespeople. So normally what I would want to do at this point is to really discuss what you're doing for your salespeople. How do you help them maintain that positive mental attitude? And I would really want to have you understand how salespeople think to be practical. And one of the things another quote I wanted to just share with you from an author, W. Clement Stone, and that is, "Sales are contingent upon attitude of the salesperson, not the attitude of the prospect." So you may think that dealing with your prospect, and that's where all the issues are, it really is keeping that positive attitude for your salespeople. So challenge one, managing those big and fragile egos. So perception's a key word here. You've heard sometimes possession is 9/10 of the law, but perception is 9/10 of what really is out there. So it isn't necessarily the true meaning of what's happening behind that person, but salespeople tend to seem to have big egos, or others might describe them as fragile. And they have a strong drive. They're really trying to achieve those measurable results that others can see, and they also supporting them emotionally is really what helps them really get their results, and getting publicly honored is a key point. And speaking of that, so in this challenge, one way is to consider doing company-sponsored awards. Successful salespeople need and deserve that kind of special treatment. And we'll talk a little later, but think about what those salespeople are up against every day when they're out trying to sell for you. Give recognition as often as you can. You can share sales successes by newsletters, posters around the office that really show and specifically picture a salesperson. Challenge 2, most high-achieving salespeople don't want to deal with all the administrative details, processes. Salespeople sometimes can seem careless with details and poor at doing administrative work. And you really can't fault them for that, because you really want to have a clear sales process and some level of structure that salespeople can operate and keep it to a minimum. The reason for that, generally, they'll get better results when they have a needed balance between that administrative work to do versus what they really want to do and what you would like to have them do, and that's be outselling. Minimize the amount of administrative work they have to do. You can do that by assigning other staff resources to provide them administrative support help if possible. In some companies that's not possible, but if there's some way that you can offload some of those things. And key points really are around, I know most of you probably have a CRM system of some sort or some way of tracking your customer relationships. But if you're relying on the salesperson to do that and get it right, and the complexities of some of those CRM systems, they're not going to give you the data you need to be able to show that you're meeting or exceeding on your sales. So all those are important from an administrative perspective. 3, most high achieving salespeople, they're very passionate without a lot of facts. So they come to you with this great suggestion, and they really have all these things that they really want to push forward and have a great idea about how to sell better or how to sell differently, but they don't always have all the facts that are needed to support that. So you want to be careful with what that is as it comes in from them. They can also be very impulsive about decision making and judgments around what their ideas are, because they are so passionate. So you want to encourage them to slow down in the decisions. One of the things that we talk about in a little more depth in the actual class session is the 7-day rule, which basically allows, take the next 7 days. We want to hear more about the idea, get your facts together, let's talk about it in that way. And then again, I would probably spend another 10-15 minutes discussing how would you handle that situation, knowing that. So in this case, since we don't really have the time in today's session to go through that, I just throw that out as a rhetorical question for you to think through. So challenge 4, picking the right time and setting for discussion around poor sales results. It's time to discuss that performance issue. Make sure you're doing it in private. And I'll say that that holds true for any employee from an HR perspective, but for salespeople, it's very important that they're not discussed any of these types of things in any type of setting where a peer might be overhearing that. And with sales folks, don't dwell on the mistakes that have been made during their sales team meetings, but focus instead on what needs to happen next. What's the next step? How do we get to the next thing? And look for opportunities to identify and emphasize ways you can help. Ask them what you can do to help. Bring things up that will help the sales team believe in themselves, but you want to be asking them, not telling them what to do. Because if you're asking, you're allowing them to use some of their creative juices to flow and be able to do what you need to get them motivated. So then, number 5, deal with a salesperson who does not follow the rules, programs, processes. So there is always that troublemaker that's out there, and there will inevitably be the conflicts that you'll have with some salespeople about not following rules. Encourage your salespeople. Just encourage them to express why they disagree with whatever the rule is, whatever the policy is, and why they're not following it. And don't even try to quote the rule book, because quoting the rule book will just get them more aggravated about the rule that they're already saying that they don't agree with. So you want to try to turn that conversation around and find out why, get the reasons why, and see if there's ways you can work around what that particular item is. Challenge number 6, keep the balloon filled. Think of a balloon when you're thinking about working with your salespeople. You need to keep them inflated with high levels of self-esteem. You want them to be thinking highly of themselves, and that positive mindset will make it sustained success for selling possible. And think about that mental balloon that the salespeople have. Think about the fact that it's inevitable that they see obstacles and they see rejection every day. So most salespeople are good at, and like, because they are salespeople, will like to continue to work through, and they'll deal with that. But at some point, the number of times you get that rejection, it's going to start to affect them. So you want to be keeping that self-esteem level high. So if you criticize a salesperson directly or sound like you're going to do that, it's like you're putting a pin in that balloon. You're just deflating their entire where they're going, what they're trying to do, which does not help you in trying to get them to be a productive and active salesperson. Challenge number 7. Salespeople are typically not very good at managing time. If you think about it, they love to spend that time socially talking to others. They get their best results when they're out working in that type of environment, in that atmosphere, because that's how they can make those sales. That's how they get out there and make that happen. And non-selling employees just don't get it, because to them, they come in, they have their 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever the rules are, if you will, going back to the rule set. That rule set drives where and how the standard office person is, but it does not help them in a salesperson. The sales folks may not come in till 11 o'clock in the morning to check in and drop off paperwork, whatever, and then they leave, and the rest of the office says, why do they get to come and go whenever they want? Well, they can also be out doing things at different times of the day and evening. They may be taking someone out for dinner. They may be going out and meeting someone. So if you have that understanding, and you can best help your other employees understand that that's why they are that way, but you also need to help them manage that time and not procrastinate on what they need to do. So it's a fine line to help them balance what that is. And it does cause a lot of dissension and gossip within your office. Again, be aware of that, and that's part of why we're talking about managing them differently. And the rest of your organization has to understand that as well, because it does cause that dissension, and you've got to be able to overcome that. Number 8, invest the time needed to manage the high maintenance salespeople. And that requires a lot of patience. It is the point that you'll need to make sure you're listening to that high maintenance person. They need to vent, they need to get all that out, especially because if they're holding back that information from being denied, being turned off so many times, they need to vent about that sometimes. They may need to be venting about those processes and procedures, or having to enter that time in the CRM or their detail and their data. All those things need to be heard, and the high maintenance person at some point, you just got to take the time to listen to them. So as a manager of salespeople, you just can't say, well, okay, we'll have to deal with that later. This is something they'll need to do on a regular basis. You got to hear them out. And again, be careful of the balloon, making sure that you're asking them, how would you like to handle it? Ask, don't tell, and let them talk themselves through it. At some point, though, you have to also understand that if they're extremely high maintenance and they're taking too much time and the sales aren't improving, well, maybe it's time to have a different conversation. But at least if they're making some decent sales and they're keeping their quotas up as you have designed them to be, listen to them. take that time and plan on that. Make that part of your plan today as a manager to spend time or schedule time with that person. Challenge number 9, learn the personal goals of each of your salespeople. So when you're dealing with this group, again, it's important that you make them feel important. They kind of feel the love, as the old saying used to go. Also align their goals with your goals. So if you understand what their goals are, usually financial, but not always, then you can help try to align for them to reach that financial goal. Here's what they need to do, and here are my goals. So if my goal is this, and you're helping me hit that goal or exceed that goal, that's better for you and how that works. Questions about their values, their aptitudes, what are their personal aspirations? Because they're looking 1, 2, 3 or more years into the future, and they may have that in the back of their mind, but they may not be sharing that with you. And if you know what that is and you know that's where they're heading, then you can help align their goals to make sure that they're going to hit that as well as meeting your goals. So, commit to teaming with them with training, commit if they need it to coaching. Side plug, I also do a lot of management and executive coaching, so be glad to help out in that sense. But there is a way to look at what kind of training they need to be able to be a successful salesperson. If they need that training, if they need additional type of discussion. And finally, 10, offset the levels of rejection and adversity salespeople face on a daily basis. So you're responsible for not only what they do, but also for creating that environment in which they brush off the rejection, move forward to the next prospect. Just be aware of those rejections. I mean, it hits in a couple different points in the challenges, but it really is something that you've got to be able to really be able to explain and work with. But it's your responsibility as the manager of a sales team. And unlike other employees, the average salesperson really does not or does need constant recognition and strokes from the supervisor. They need that almost on a daily basis to be productive, to be out there and feel confident in and of themselves. Again, keeping the balloon. Keep the frame of mind in which a given salesperson handles rejection has a direct and tangible effect on sales performance. So the more that you can help them help themselves, that really is a strong piece. And I've blown through this really fast. I guess I'm talking about 100 miles an hour here, so I apologize. Summary, help salespeople keep a positive mental attitude. It is your responsibility. Treat them differently based on these 10 challenges, and then understand why they need to be treated differently. And then finally, direct the team in the way that a high impact sales manager would do to overcome the challenges of managing this unique group of employees. So from there, I would ask you to think about what is your greatest takeaway from this particular session. Again, there are 10 things I just went through really quick, so apologize if I rushed through that, but I wanted to be sure I got it all in there. We take a lot of time to discuss each point in the normal classroom setting where we're going to sit there and talk through these things and discuss maybe some specific examples of what happens with your salespeople or what challenges you have individually. Those are things we look at. But one other comment I'll make about managing salespeople is sometimes the best person to manage salespeople is not a salesperson, because a salesperson wants to sell. They do not want to be stuck in an office all the time and be in that 8 to 5, 9 to 5 schedule, going to meetings all the time instead of being productive and outselling. So if you box them in, that will only make for a poor sales manager. So I'll open it for questions at this point. I have a few more slides, but it's more about my company and what I do and some background, but I'll hold off on that for a minute.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, you guys feel free to unmute yourself briefly if you'd like to, or put those in the chat.
Okay. I'll move on, and I'm sticking around here for a little bit after too. But so just a little bit about my company. Oh, go ahead. I'll back up.
Jim, you had a question? We can't hear you, Jim.
So what is the largest obstacle salespeople face? I'd go back to saying it is rejection, but it's part of their job to deal with rejection. Every time that they're trying to sell something, whatever it is they're trying to sell, they are always apt to see that about 80% of the people they talk to are going to say no. So it's only a 20% yes. So they've got to be ready for the rejection to be able to kind of brush the sand off their feet and keep going and just keep persevering. Okay.
So Jim asked, talk about keeping the emotional energy up. How do you think Zoom, et cetera, webinars can play that?
It's definitely much harder to read emotions. You'd think that, I mean, the whole idea of going video was that, gee, we can see people, so we'll understand and see their emotions. You also don't see the multitasking going on behind the scenes, although you might see their face. You don't see what they're, maybe, and I'll put this nicely, but snidely mentioning to somebody else in the room that's watching that same Zoom conversation about what you're trying to say, what you're trying to do. So Zoom does tend to, Zoom, any type of video conferencing platform, does tend to really minimize a lot of what you could see in person. That the emotion, the ability to read who you're talking to, the ability to try to drive home sales, be able to hand them that brochure that you want to hand them that says this is about what we're doing and maybe sample a product or whatever. You can't do that via the technology.
Handshake.
It does help at least to see a face and see an expression or see people maybe roll their eyes a little more, but even that's hard when you get 20 people on a screen and you really can't see the person that well.
Yeah, that firm handshake and just reading what they're thinking is really tough. Thank you.
So aligning goals has been something key for me for, well, I've been in business for over 35 years and then some. I won't go into those numbers, but the idea of trying to get the person to align their goals, it is a challenge sometimes because their goals may be completely personal and totally away from what the business is. But if they're a top salesperson, you try to find the key points that will drive that connection. If it's not and ends up becoming not a compatible goal, then it is something that you have a discussion. Well, I love to hear what you're talking about. You want to go off and go cruising every other week and you want to go out and go to see how many different continents you can visit in the next 2 years, but what does that do for me? How do we do that? Is that because you're going to sell so much more and you're going to meet all the goals that you can do that, and we can allow and talk about your time off? Well, then maybe we have something to talk about. I have had a few experiences that we've been able to control and drive people to manage that together so that it does work together. There have been a few that didn't, and it's like, I would recommend that you find a place that can hit that goal then, and I don't think this is the right place for you. And if you're a great salesperson, I want to keep you, but if you're not going to support the rest of what my business is doing, then we have to talk. So that's just part of that conversation. Hope that helped. Okay. Okay. Let me just talk a little bit about me and my company. I created Strategic Orchestration about 8 years ago, actually in Richmond, Virginia. And the reason I chose the name, it's the tongue twister to say, I've learned over the years, but it's also kind of, I look at it because many companies try to use that sporting metaphor. We're going to go get them. We're going to go win. We're going to do this. And sales teams, sales folks love to win. They want to win the sale. So there is a little aspect of that. But for me as a company, when I tried to create this, I try to go on more of a musical theme. Because if you think about it from a symphony perspective, every section of that symphony, when they do what they're supposed to be doing and do it right, it has great harmony. So if you can perform at that best level and you're doing the best you can across the board, then you're going to have a great masterpiece. So I look at applying that to the workplace. I'm looking at individuals who make up teams, teams make up organizations. They all do need to work together. It becomes a harmonious thing, not a fight, because if everybody's playing off of a different sheet of music, it doesn't sound very good. And the other piece is the sporting metaphor. To me, someone wins, that means somebody lost. So I don't like the idea of somebody losing in the case of business. So that's, you know, my reason. But I have been helping coach folks and educate managers and executives in companies of all sizes. It's been all across the board. When I moved to Alabama about 1.5 years ago, one of the first things I did was join the chamber, which thankfully has been a huge help to me to get to know people. I've been coming down here to visit with several folks. My wife's whole family is here, so I've been visiting Alabama for the last 36 years, at least 3 or 4 times a year. So I'm familiar with the area. I love it down here. So we were very glad to move when I had the opportunity to do so. But when I look at doing the different coaching that I've been doing and so forth, there is a concern. There's about 72% of employees that feel disengaged, probably more so now. These studies were pre-COVID. So they feel disengaged, and the average turnover rate is about 50% in the first year for new employees. It is a high turnover. I know we're experiencing, I've seen that here with a number of folks I've talked to. But there's an ongoing need to remove that dysfunction and ineffectiveness, try to keep folks together, looking at it from an impartial point of view. I have worked in several different areas, and I've seen that there are ways to work through that, and we can get some better buy-in and re-engagement. It also, don't know if I put it in here, I didn't. It's a known fact right now that it costs you a minimum of 3 times annual salary of a person to have to retrain a new person to fill that role every time someone leaves. So that's an additional cost you don't need if you can keep your people, keep good people with you. What I do is I actually am in a franchise with the Allen Training Centers, and I use their materials, but then I also bring in my years of experience to help make that happen and bring that together and bring in a blended learning approach, which is both online and classroom led. I also will do it over Zoom or whatever platform if needed, especially in these current days. I've been able to do that for a few folks as well. So if we needed to do that, I would be glad to do that and do any type of follow-up activity to basically pull that together. So it happens over a month-over-month process too. So all of the courses I offer are not once and done. We do it, meet once a month, we meet the next month and review, and then talk about the next topic and continue that on for the period of the material. For the results-driven sales manager, that is a 10-month course. It's 2 hours a month for 10 months. We go through this module in a little more depth and some worksheets and some exercises that we throw in, as well as then moving on to the rest of the topics that are there. So me, myself, again, over 35 years of different management experience, and I've worked in a number of areas. I've worked in financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, telecommunications, regional sales, and I've built roadmaps and updated strategic plans. I could go on, but I won't. But this is really what I have a passion to do. I like to work with people, either on an individual basis or in teams. So I've been doing personal coaching here in town. I've got 4 current coaches, coaching clients that I'm working with in building their businesses, and it's just been a really great thing for me to see some of the growth in this area. So, and that's all I have. And again, I just want to thank APG Local as well as the Chamber for the opportunity. And I've got a lot of other topics in the future, if need be, that I can bring. Thanks, Will.
Okay, sorry about that. I was posting that link there in the chat for you guys. That's a link to all of the prior recordings of webinars. I posted one earlier to our direct YouTube channel. We'll have this recording posted later today. Does anyone have any questions, comments for the greater good before we stop the recording? I see Tim Ross shaking his head. I kind of missed the Tiger King background, Tim. But Dale,
Next
thank
time.
you so much for joining
Next
us
time.
today. And coming to present. Thank you especially to APG Local. I think I saw Ginger get off the call earlier, but I see we still have Pam Harper and Pam Ding on the call. So thank you to APG Local for sponsoring this year's series of the Sales and Marketing Councils. This is the last one for the year. Next month, we'll be picking up with the final HR Council of the year. So you guys just keep an eye out for emails. I know you've gotten all those today from me. I've sent out quite a few already. You guys take care, stay safe, and have a great rest of the week. Okay, Jacob, I see that. All right. If you'll email me, I'll take care of you. All right, guys, you have a safe week. I'm going to turn off this recording.